Hi, I'm Johnny, I'm Andrew from soundtrack.academy, and in this video I'm going to take you through a short film I worked on a few years ago. I'm going to take you through timings and how to get set up in that kind of way, how to have a little mini spotting session, how to choose your themes and where to place them, and also take you a little bit through my actual workflow that I use when working on these kinds of projects. Before we get to that though, if film music composition is something that you're really interested in, head over to soundtrack.academy/ebook and download your free copy of my ebook, The Media Scoring Guide, where I talk about the essential skills you'll need, the equipment you'll need, and also the standard process of working on a film as well. Okay, let's get stuck in. So your first step when you sit down and come to work on a film, it can be really tempting to just put the film on, sit with your keyboard and then go, go, go. That's not the approach you want to take. Just like a painting, you wouldn't just open a blank canvas and just suddenly start with your paintbrush straight on the canvas. You actually think about what you're going to do first. One of the hardest things is deciding where to actually start and end your musical cues. I try to watch a film and really think about what I can add to it with music, rather than just trying to plonk music wherever. I think which scenes need music, which scenes really don't need music. But yeah, the start and end points are really, really tricky. So really, you wouldn't start with a small scene straight away and start working straight away. You would look at the film as a whole, watch it 2 or 3 times, work out an overall plan. Because in my early days of writing for short films, I would realize that I might plonk all my music in one section, so there'd be no music for half of the film, and then suddenly the whole second half has loads of music in it. So actually making sure you've got a balance of where the tracks are throughout the whole film as well is really, really important. But start and end points are particularly difficult. Try to find some reason to start. So on this clip, you can see where my cue starts down here. And if I just play, we hear a cough. And this is Edward's cough. And that's the realization. So I thought that was a really nice moment to start the music when he realizes there's someone else in the room with him. Decide where I was going to end this cue. There was a natural point where he gives up trying to break through the wall. This section here. Sits down. This would be a nice point to sort of hold the chord, maybe a bit of a fade out. And then also there's a crackling that comes out from the wall. You can hear that there. Essentially there's a walkie-talkie hidden in there, which he then discovers. So a nice point to have a break from the music. So start and end points, really, really important. Once you've got that, the next step is to look into actual hit points within the cue. So deciding what points you want to emphasize with the music. Again, remembering not to try and hit every single one, because then it'll feel a bit like a cartoon, a bit like a Mickey Mousing. But just deciding on a few key things, being subtle with a few as well. So I like the fact that here he looked back. I thought that was a sort of an emotional response from him. So we've got a bit of an emotive cue in the music, which I will start playing shortly. There's the obvious one where the claw marks are spotted. I'll just pull this along. So here, sees these claw marks, really wanted to heighten that. And then the actual movement from kind of slowly looking around the room to full-on panic, wanting to get out, was really, really important.
Is anyone?
And the give up at the end. So those are our key hit points in this cue. The next thing to decide on is actual themes, what you want to have throughout your piece. Really should do this before you're looking at individual cues. But thinking, as we spoke about with the 3 key concepts, the leitmotif. Do you want to go with a leitmotif approach to have a certain theme for specific characters or the room or whatever else, or do you want to just ignore that totally? I went with a bit of both. So there's some very subtle leitmotifs. I'll play this one. So we have this little clarinet motif which appears throughout the film, which is kind of Edward's motif. We hear it. So that little motif, we hear that a few times throughout the film, generally when Edward is involved. I have this piano motif. Very similar kind of pattern. And that's generally to highlight where there's anything emotional or emotive happening. That's generally when piano is used throughout the film. We have a cello pattern now. The cello pattern I'm going to play you doesn't sound as it does in the final,
That's because of the samples, which again, I'll get onto later. But this little pattern here, this is to show anger and sinisterness. And again, this appears throughout the film as well. So some important themes there, some key points of information, which we're going to give to the listener. And those are going to come back throughout the entire film, ebbing and flowing on various instruments as well. Whether it's obvious or more subtle, it's going to appear in a whole type of different forms. And then the next step through my process is to think about instrumentation. It's a really important choice. Putting something on a violin is going to give a totally different feeling to if you put it on a bass tuba or a bass clarinet, sorry. It's going to sound totally different. One of the first things is actually getting the start, where you want your music to start, lined up with the video. And to do that, it's simply changing the tempo for the first half of the track. So you can see I've got the video here, so my score actually starts at bar 37, where this cue starts. So you'll see this, my first tempo is 81.9751. Very specific tempo. How I come to that, essentially, I line up my locator as to where I want my track to start, and then change the tempo. You'll notice when I drag, the image on the left, you can see the movie is actually moving with it. So if I come down, you'll see I'm at 79, 80, and then when I get to 81, that's when the cut is. Moves from the long shot to the close-up. And I go through each number and make sure it's lined up perfectly so that my music starts exactly on cue. Then you can set your new tempo. So you'll see that bar 37, my new tempo is 50 BPM, because that's what I wanted this little opening passage to be. So we have 50 BPM up until bar 45. Bar 45 is where we spot the claw on the wall. And you can see the tempo just drops only for 2 bars down to 41 BPM. That just leaves us 2 bars before we set off with our new tempo. Now, the reason the tempo drops here is because we've got a held chord, and that chord just needs to be held until the next hit point, which is the transfer to the shot of the door. So again, I'm just playing with this tempo, moving it until we have that door comes into shot. So 42, ease away, 41, dead on. That's where we start. Again, going through the numbers. And then I chose my tempo for the next part, 146 BPM. And that lasts until he gives up, trying to knock the door down. And again, we have a tempo here just to let us make sure that our final note ends up being exactly where we want it on that final cut. This is before any music's been created. We're just doing this purely conceptually. We know what music we want. We know the kind of pulse that we want. And we're keying all of this in before we've even put any kind of note down. At this stage, I wouldn't have a clue what even key the piece is going to be in, unless I've really planned that out. In terms of coming up with a tempo, there's various ways of doing it. Obviously, you know the general speed of what you want. So I knew that this bar 47, where we have the faster tempo coming, I knew that I wanted something a bit driving because of the anger. Bit of a faster pulse. But sometimes you don't necessarily know specifically what tempo it's going to be. You'll know it's around about 140, 150. What you can do to help come up is just watch the film and get a feel for it. So if I just mute the music, we'll just solo the actual track. So if we play from here, just with the audio,
is anyone there?
You can get a feel for a pace by watching it.
Help!
You can see how he's banging. Bap, 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 bap. Okay, so
Someone get
maybe
me
somewhere
out!
around that kind of tempo. Hear my
Help!
clicks. That might be a good starting point. Work out what that is, and there you've got your tempo. It can be as simple as that. You can watch for camera angle changes, how quickly they're changing, and match those tempos. In the reboot clip, which I think I'll show you in another video, the tempo matches a clock that's on screen, that we have a ticking from a clock. So find what you're going to take to cue your tempo and run with it.
Thanks for watching so far. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more film and media composition and production tips. This video is actually part of a larger course that I have, which is geared all around film music composition and production. In the course, we cover this project as well as looking at some epic style music, and we actually create the music for part of a short film from scratch together. I take you through the whole process, really getting into the how we do things, not just the what we do. If you're interested, you can sign up to the course for just $10. I'll include a link to that discount in the description. The full price of the course is normally $120. Okay, let's get back to the tutorial.
Okay, some of the actual instrumental choices then. For this piece, I wanted some flexibility in terms of where my themes were coming in. I didn't want to be set to specific bars or anything like that. And an easy way to do that in film music is pads. And they get used a lot, but you'll notice straight away we have string pad, which allows us to bring in our themes a bit more fluidly where we want them to happen, rather than having to make sure we're always on beat 1 of bar 4. That said, it is still to a metronome. If I turn the metronome on, you can still see it's timed up. The way that I work, this makes it a lot easier. I always recommend working with the metronome when you're doing film music. If you're adding effects and you need effects to be timed, you need the metronome there. So we've got a lot of information already in that first little section before we get to the tempo change. So the pad starts high pad. A really nice thing that I'm amazed how many people don't think about is not starting full chords together. So that string chord, high violin start, and then bring in the bass. So powerful. And you'll be amazed at what the difference that can make. So we've got the pads and then these themes that I talked about earlier. This is Edward's theme played on the clarinet. It's here. So a fairly ambiguous theme because we kind of have that minor third, but then it drops onto the second. It doesn't define specifically what chord it is or what we're hearing. And then it's repeated on the flute. So again, bouncing parts around the orchestra, not just thinking about one instrument taking the melody the whole time. That comes in your arranging. A hint at our little cello line that came in there. And then this big chord, which is a particularly interesting one. So there is a few chords kind of hinted here, non-actually specified, and that's what makes this chord work. And why it's quite good for a filmic chord, because it doesn't give you everything in one go. It's polytonal, essentially. So the D and the A really make you think you're working in D, particularly the fact that we've got the D in the root. So that's the first and the fifth of D, which are the sort of structural notes of a D chord. The C sharp can make it feel like you're hinting at a D major 7 in some ways, which is quite a pretty chord. But then you throw in the A and the C sharp themselves, first and third of an A major. So again, that's a bit weird because if we have a D major 7, happy chord, A major, happy. Then you throw in that B flat, and that's what really skews everything because that clashes with the A. It's a minor second with the A, so it's a really horrible noise together. But again, in the arrangement, they're not put right next to one another. If I was to put it right next to each other, it almost becomes a little bit too much. I'll do the same at the top. That's a real clash. A little bit too much. So by spacing them out an octave apart, this one, the clash is still there, but it's just softer. It really makes you wonder what that chord is rather than just definitely being discordant. So we have the tempo change section. Fairly standard compositional technique here. Ostinato cello playing this bottom part. And then the orchestral parts chopping and changing in between his dialogue. What's really key is how we end this section. Now we see on the visual, he's really active, really pushing, and then suddenly gives up, and so does the music. Gives up with this big final chord. The emotional cue comes back on the piano. And that's also what ends us. You'll have noticed so far, I've just been using the Logic basic sample libraries. Now, if that's all you've got, that's fine. Work with it. These are quite good, I think. Plonk a load of reverb on it, you can get away with it. But this is my plan score. So I have a few different ways that I come about creating my final music. Generally, I have a plan project, which is all synced up to match with the video. I use the basic samples, or sometimes I might use multi-instruments to get a better quality samples, but still on a very limited memory usage on the computer, essentially. It's about being efficient and optimizing it. What I also sometimes do, for not for all projects, depending on how I'm feeling really, but for this project, I'll actually tidy up the score as well. This can make my life a lot easier when I start working with the better samples. I'll essentially treat the other sample libraries as real instruments, and I'll try and play them in and try and read from the score to get it sounding as good as I can and as natural as I can on those other instruments. So you'll see here's the actual score for this cue, which is called Edward. So this can make my life a lot easier because I can print this out and then I can actually play from it when I'm creating my other, my high quality recordings. So yeah, this is the plan essentially. It's quantized. Everything is perfect in inverted commas so that when I export it into other programs, you see everything's starts and ends pretty much, well, all starts definitely perfectly on the note so that the score works well. And then so that when I bring this in from my other sample libraries, it's easier to work with as well. And I'll show you those now too. For this project, I did have Contact and I did have Play. So let's have a look at those two. So Contact 2 is complete. So straight away, if I play this, you'll hear a big difference in the quality of the samples. There's no pianos in this. I use those separately. And it particularly comes into play when you hear the cellos. It's very quiet, but I've actually got articulations on there now. Those are pizzicato rather than bowed as they were in the Logic version. Likewise, as we take off, much better cello sound and much better brass sound as well. I'll quickly show you Play as well. So you can hear the Play stuff here. Again, really nice authentic string sound. Big bass. So my aim by breaking down these tracks, firstly, it's to save processor speed. So you'll notice I haven't brought in the movie. I've used my multi-instruments so I have limited instances of Play open. And I'm trying to get each instrument to sound as authentic as I can so that the overall package, when it's all put together, sounds good. So the final step of the process is to actually have an audio track. That's my final one. And you'll see that it's just simple audio tracks. So that's the bounce from Contact, and that's the bounce from East West. And they're combined together. And we have this nice, full, bold, final sound for the film. This isn't the same system that I used for every single composition. It changes for pretty much every single one. And I think yours should too, particularly until you find what really, really works for you. One downside of doing it this way is if you suddenly notice that there's a slight change that you need to happen in bar 13, you've then got to go into your other project, change it, bounce it, re-import it. It can be quite a long process, but it saves you resources, means that your computer's always working at its fastest. And I think it means you can aim for a bit of a high quality. You're not limiting yourself to try and save computer resources. You can go all out on your strings, bounce them, and then go all out on your brass, bounce that, etc.
Thanks again for watching. Don't forget you can get access to my full course, the Film Music Composition and Production in Logic Pro X, following the link in the description for just $10 instead of the normal $120 price tag. As always, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and remember to get your free copy of my ebook, The Media Scoring Guide, by visiting soundtrack.academy/ebook. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.